Imaobong stood frozen in the middle of the schoolyard, her cheeks burning like hot coal. Laughter echoed around her, loud and sharp. Her classmates had formed a wide circle, clapping and stomping, mimicking the way she had sung during music practice. One of the boys sang, "Twinkle, twinkle, little star," exaggerating her off-key voice. Then the others busted out laughing. "Please stop," Imaobong begged. Her voice was shaking as tears started flowing down her eyes, but the taunting only grew louder. Meanwhile, her best friend, Ini, stood among the crowd, avoiding her gaze. Even her class teacher couldn't step in to help her. She just shook her head in disappointment. When the bell rang, signifying the end of the break period, Imaobong ran to the bedroom. Tears were running down her face. With trembling hands, she bolted the door and collapsed to the ground. "Why can't I sing like everyone else?" she whispered to herself. Her dreams of becoming a famous singer were shattered. That evening, Imaobong sat quietly in her room, staring at her old notebook. It was full of songs that she had written. She loved music, but now the thought of singing again made her stomach ache. Then her mother knocked gently on her door and entered. "Imaobong, your teacher called me today," she said, sitting beside her. Imaobong buried her face in her hands. "I know, Mama, I was terrible." Her mother placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, then said, "My child, not everyone shines in the same way, but everyone has a gift. Sometimes we need to find our true voice." Imaobong nodded gently. Though her heart was still heavy, she did not want another gift. She just wanted to sing well. "But, Mama, I want to sing. Why is it so hard for me?" Imaobong said. Her mother smiled, then said, "Your voice is not only just made for music. Maybe you'll find it somewhere else." Those words stayed with Imaobong that night. Could my mother be right? Could there be another way for my voice to shine? She thought, then drifted off to sleep. The next morning, as Imaobong walked into the classroom, she avoided everyone. She could feel the whispers behind her back. Even Ini, her best friend, avoided her eye contact. During break period, Imaobong approached Ini near the mango tree where they always ate their snacks. "Ini," she called, "why didn't you stand up for me yesterday?" she asked with a trembling voice. Ini was struggling with her lunchbox, then said, I didn't know what to say. Everyone was just laughing. I didn't want them to laugh at me too," she stammered. Imaobong felt disappointed and abandoned. "But you are my best friend. I needed you to stand up for me." Ini looked down. Guilt etched on her face. "I'm sorry, I was scared." Imaobong shook her head as tears filled her eyes. "I thought friends were supposed to stand by each other." Then she turned and walked away. Her heart was heavy. That afternoon, Imaobong sat under a large odara tree behind the school. She took out her notebook and began to write, letting her emotions flow as she wrote. Sometimes the loudest voice is silence, and the truest friends are rare. She stared at the words. Her tears stained the ink. Then she heard a gentle voice behind her. "That's beautiful." The voice sounded familiar. Startled, she turned to see Mr. Ubong, the literature teacher. He often sat under the tree to read during his breaks. He was dressed in a flowing milk-colored agbada, his eyes sparkling with kindness. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, sitting beside her before she could answer. "What are you writing?" he asked, pointing to her notebook. "Just poems," she said reluctantly. "May I see?" Imaobong hesitated before showing him her notebook. "I was just writing. It's nothing." Mr. Ubong read her words aloud. His voice was deep and melodic. "Imaobong, you have a gift. Your words are powerful, he said. Really? She asked. Her voice was filled with doubt. Really? He said firmly. Not everyone can sing, and not everyone can write like this either. You have a voice, Imaobong, but it's different from what you expected. Imaobong shook her head. I want to sing, but I can't. Everyone is laughing at me. He smiled, then spoke in a comforting tone. Singing isn't the only way to share your voice. Words can be just as powerful, if not more. His words planted seeds of hope in her heart. Could her notebook hold the key to finding her true voice? Over the next few days, Imaobong could not stop thinking about Mr. Obong's words. She spent hours after school writing in her notebook, pouring out her feelings. The pain of being laughed at, the hurt of In's betrayal, and her fear of being invisible, all of it spilled onto the pages. One evening, her mother peeked into her room. Imaobong, come and help me in the kitchen, she called. Imaobong sighed, but grabbed her notebook and followed. While slicing yams, her mother glanced at the notebook she was holding. You've been writing a lot lately, she observed. Imaobong nodded. It's true, Mama. It's the only thing that makes me feel better. Can I read one? Her mother asked gently. Imaobong hesitated, but handed over the notebook. Her mother's eyes softened as she read. Imaobong, these are beautiful. Have you shown them to anyone? No, Imaobong replied. Who would care about my silly poems? Her mother shook her head. They are not silly. Your words have power. You just need to believe in yourself. The next day at school, during morning assembly, the principal made an announcement. The school is organizing a talent showcase next month, he said. Students can sing, dance, act, or present anything creative. It's your time to shine. The students cheered, but Imaobong's stomach sank. The memory of her past humiliation was still fresh in her mind. During break period, Mr. Obong appeared near the Udara tree. Ah, my favorite writer, he greeted with a smile. Imaobong laughed gently. I'm not a writer. I'm just trying to find myself. That's exactly what a writer does, he said. Did you hear about the talent showcase? Imaobong nodded. But I don't think I can perform. I don't want people to laugh at me again. What if you read one of your poems? He suggested. Her eyes widened. Read my poems? In front of everyone? Why not? Your words deserve to be heard, Imaobong. Let the world see the melody within you, he encouraged. For the first time, Imaobong felt a flicker of courage. Maybe this was her chance to prove to herself and everyone else that she had a voice worth hearing. Before the schoolyard incident, Imaobong had tried countless times to improve her singing. She practiced in the bedroom, where the walls made her voice sound fuller. She sang while fetching water from the well, her voice mingling with the chatter of birds. But no matter how hard she tried, her voice always wavered. High notes cracked like broken glasses, and low notes sounded more like whispers. Her most painful failure came during a church choir practice. It was a bright Sunday afternoon, and Imaobong's mother had encouraged her to join the church choir group. This will help you to sing better, her mother said with a hopeful smile. Imaobong sat in the back row, nervously clutching her hymn book. The choir mistress, a tall woman named Sister Ekaite, clapped her hands. Let's warm up, she said. Imaobong, come to the front and lead us in the first hymn. Imaobong's heart pounded as she stood before the group. Then she opened the hymn book to Amazing Grace and began to sing. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. But her voice wobbled rising and falling in strange pitches. By the second line, she heard muffled giggles. By the third, the laughter was open. Sister Ekaite frowned, then raised her hand. "Stop," she commanded. Imaobong froze, her throat tight. "Child, you are not singing, you are shouting," Sister Ekaite said. Her tone was sharp, but the chuckles from the choir were sharper. I was trying," Imaobong stammered, her cheeks burning. "Trying is not enough," Sister Ekaite replied. "You need to listen to the key and follow it. Sit down for now." Imaobong sat down. Tears filled her eyes. The choir members whispered behind their hymn books, and one boy muttered loudly, "She sings like a broken radio." From that day, Imaobong vowed, "I will never sing in public again." After the choir humiliation, Imaobong avoided the church group. She pretended to be sick whenever they called for practice and stayed home during rehearsals. Her mother noticed her silence. One evening, she asked, "Imaobong, are you not going to the choir practice anymore?" "I'm not good enough, Mama," she whispered. "Everyone laughs at me." Her mother hugged her tightly. "My child, failure is part of the journey. Don't let it stop you." Those words did not comfort Imaobong. Each failure weighed her down, and every laugh felt like a knife in her chest. So she decided to focus on her writing instead. "At least my words can't betray me," she thought. Therefore, she buried herself in her notebook. Every night, Imaobong dreamed of standing on a big stage, holding a microphone in her hand, and a crowd clapping for her beautiful voice. But in her dreams, her voice always faltered. As a result, the audience would cover their ears and start to laugh. Many times, she would wake up crying. The humiliation of the dream was feeling as real as the one in the church and schoolyard. At school, her classmates never let her forget. Whenever Imaobong walked by, someone would hum an off-key tune and others would laugh. Even her best friend, Ini, grew distant, avoiding her during break periods. At home, her little brother, Edidion, teased her innocently. "Sing for me. Let me hear your frog song," he said one evening, hopping around like a frog. "Stop it," Imaobong snapped, throwing a pillow at him. Edidion ran away laughing, but Imaobong felt the sting. Even her family did not believe in her. One afternoon, Imaobong sat on her bed, staring at her notebooks. For weeks, she hadn't written a single word. What's the point? She thought bitterly. Her dreams of singing were crushed, and even her writing seemed meaningless. Her mother knocked on the door and entered with a steaming bowl of pepper soup. "Imaobong, you haven't eaten all day," she said softly. Imaobong shrugged. "I'm not hungry." Her mother set the bowl down and sat beside her. "I know you are hurting, my child, but you can't let this pain take over your life." "What life, Mama?" Imaobong burst out. "I'm a failure at singing, and nobody wants to hear my poems. Everyone is laughing at me." Her mother cupped her face. "The world may laugh at you today, but that doesn't mean they will laugh forever. You are more than what they say. You just need to find your path." Imaobong stared at her mother, her words gradually sinking in. Could it really be possible to rise above the laughter? One day, after school, Imaobong wandered into the small town library to escape her classmates. She loved the quiet, the way the words seemed to pause between the rows of books. As she browsed through, a colorful book caught her eye. Famous Women of Africa. She pulled it out and flipped through the pages. She stopped at a chapter about a woman named Chinua. She was a Nigerian poet and motivational speaker. The book described how Chinua had faced similar struggles, being laughed at for her stammer and told she would never amount to anything. But Chinua prevailed. turning her pain into poetry and used her voice to inspire others. Imaobong's heart raced. Can I do the same? She wondered. That evening, Imaobong could not stop thinking about Chinua. As she sat at the dinner table, she barely touching her food. Her father noticed and raised an eyebrow. Imaobong, you've been quiet lately, he said. What is the matter? Imaobong hesitated, then blurted out, Papa, can someone like me ever inspire others? Her father dropped his spoon. What kind of question is that? Of course you can. Why do you ask? She took a deep breath, then explained about Chinua, the book she found, and her doubt about ever being good at anything. Papa, she turned her pain into something beautiful. But as for me, I don't think I have that kind of strength. Oh. Her father leaned forward, his voice steady. Imaobong, do you know what a diamond looks like before it becomes shiny and beautiful? She shook her head. Just a piece of coal, he said. But pressure, heat, and time transforms it. You may feel like a coal now, but you are on your way to becoming a diamond. You just need to keep going. His words warmed her heart, even though doubt still lingered. The next day, Imaobong visited the library again. She found more books about people who had faced challenges but later found their path. One was a collection of African poems. She opened it and read aloud. A voice may tremble, but it still speaks. A heart may break, but it still beats. These words resonated deeply. She jotted them down in her notebook. As she wrote, the librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Ojong, approached her. You've been coming here a lot lately, Mrs. Ojong said. Do you like poetry? Imaobong nodded shyly. It's the only thing that makes me feel better. Mrs. Ojong smiled, then asked, Do you write your own poems? Yes, Imaobong admitted, but I don't think they are good. May I see one? Mrs. Ojong asked gently. Imaobong hesitated, but handed her notebook over. Mrs. Ojong read only a few lines. Her eyes lighted up. Imaobong, these are incredible. Your words have depth and emotions. You have a gift too. Really? Imaobong asked, her voice uncertain. Really? Mrs. Ojong said firmly. You just need to believe in yourself. And when you are ready, you should share this with others. That evening, Imaobong sat on the edge of her bed with her notebook open. She thought about what Mrs. Ojong, Mr. Obong, and her father had said. When her mother walked in to say goodnight, Imaobong looked up. Mama, what if I read my poems at the school talent showcase? Her mother blinked in surprise. Your poems? Imaobong, that is a wonderful idea. But what if they laugh at me again? Imaobong whispered. Her mother sat beside her. It is true, they might laugh. Yes, but they might also listen. And those who laugh aren't the ones you are writing for. You are writing for the ones who need to hear your words. Her mother's encouragement gave her a spark of courage. For the first time, Imaobong began to imagine herself standing in front of an audience, not as a singer, but this time as a poet. The next morning, when Imaobong arrived at school, she was determined. As she walked past her classmates, their whispers and sneakers did not stink as much as before. She had decided she would read her poems at the talent showcase. During lunchtime, she went to her favorite spot under the Udara tree and began flipping through her notebook. She chose 3 poems that felt the most meaningful to her. Ones that spoke of pain, hope, and finding strength. Maybe this will show them who I really am, she thought. After school, she went to see Mrs. Ojong at the library. Mrs. Ojong, I have decided to share my poems at the school showcase, Imaobong said, her voice wavering slightly. Mrs. Ojong's face lit up. That's wonderful, Imaobong. Have you practiced reading them aloud? Not really, Imaobong admitted. I'm scared I would mess up. Come, Mrs. Ojong said, guiding her to a quiet corner of the library. Let's start now. Read one for me. Imaobong swallowed hard, then opened her notebook. She read softly at first. Her voice was shaky. Sometimes the world is loud, drowning the quiet heart, but the quiet heart carries strength enough to move mountains. When she finished, Mrs. Ojong clapped softly. Imaobong, that was beautiful. Your words are powerful, but you must let your voice reflect that. Speak with confidence. You have something important to say. Every day after school, Imaobong practiced with Mrs. Ojong. At home, she stood in front of a mirror, reading her poems aloud. At first, she cringed at how timid she sounded, but slowly her voice grew steadier. One evening, her little brother Edidion peeked into her room. What are you doing? He asked. Practicing, Aret said without looking up. Practicing for what? For the school showcase. Edidion's eyes widened. Are you going to sing? No, she said firmly. I'm going to read my poems. He tilted his head. Poems? Like the ones you write in your notebook? Yes, Imaobong replied, meeting his gaze. Edidion grinned. Can I hear one? Imaobong hesitated, then nodded. She opened her notebook and read a short poem about courage. When she finished, Edidion clapped loudly. That was amazing. Imaobong, I didn't know you could write like that. Her brother's enthusiasm further boosted her confidence. Maybe she could do this after all. The school auditorium buzzed with excitement. Parents and teachers and students filled the seats, eager to see the talent on display. Backstage, Imaobong held her notebook tightly. Her palms were sweaty and her heart beat faster. Next up, we have Imaobong Ekanem. She will be sharing her original poetry, the announcer said. When her name was mentioned, Imaobong froze. Her legs felt like jelly as she stepped onto the stage. She glanced at the sea of faces before her. She looked curious. Others looked amused. Taking a deep breath, she opened her notebook. My name is Imaobong Ekanem, she began, her voice shaky. And these are my words. Imaobong's hands trembled as she held her notebook. For a moment, the crowd seemed blurry, the faces melting into one daunting mouth. She took a deep breath, remembering her mother's words. You write for the ones who need to hear your voice. She began to read. The world may laugh, but I will not fall. My voice may tremble, but it will stand tall. Every tear I've cried, every scar I've borne will bloom into strength, a new life born. Her voice wavered at first, but with each line, it grew stronger. The audience began to quiet. The sneakers stopped, replaced by a hushed stillness. Imaobong turned the page to read another poem. They said I was broken, unworthy, too weak, but even in silence, the quiet ones speak. Through the cracks in my heart, a melody grew, a song not of notes, but a voice that is true. By the time she finished, the hall erupted into applause. For a moment, Imaobong stood frozen, unsure of what had just happened. Then slowly, she smiled. From the crowd, she saw Mrs. Ojong and her mother clapping with pride. Even Edidion was on his feet, shouting, "That's my sister!" As she walked off the stage, a classmate approached her. It was Ini, her former best friend. "Imaobong," Ini said, her voice hesitant. "That was amazing. I'm so sorry for how I treated you. I was wrong." Imaobong looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Ini." That night, as Imaobong lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she replayed the applause in her head, a sound she had never imagined would be for her. Her mother knocked softly and entered. "Imaobong, I'm so proud of you," she said, sitting beside her. Imaobong sat up. Mama, I never thought they'd listen. For the first time, I felt like my voice mattered. Her mother smiled. It always mattered. You just needed to believe in it. The next morning at school, something strange happened. Instead of laughter, her classmates greeted her with smiles. Imaobong, can I read one of your poems? A girl asked. Do you think you will write more? Another boy added. Imaobong's heart swelled. For the first time, she realized that her voice wasn't just hers. It could inspire others. The end. Moral lesson. No matter how small or insignificant you feel, your voice, your talent, and your dreams have value. In the Bible, in Proverbs chapter 18, verses number 16, it is written, a man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. Life will present challenges and self-doubt may whisper doubt into your ears, but never let those lies win. Embrace your journey. Rise after every fall and let your unique melody inspire others. True success is not about perfection. It is about courage, perseverance, and believing in the beauty of your voice. See you at the top of your melody. Thank you for watching this story till the end. If you liked the story, please share the story to your loved ones. Click the like and the subscribe button, and do not forget to turn on the notification bell icon for instant notification whenever I upload another video. Please keep the communication coming. Tell me what you think about the video in the comment section below. Please remember to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel until I bring another story your way. Bye and stay blessed. Bye bye.